So welcome everybody to the inaugural video of my new YouTube channel, TheInformation, where you will get all the information on the latest in indie pop, chillwave, electronic music, a little bit of shoegaze, ambient, IDM, stuff like that. As the channel gets going and growing, I think you guys will have a better idea of, what my music taste is going to be, what kind of releases you would expect me to cover. Not really going to do a lot of metal, country, not so much hip-hop, stuff like that, but like I said, mostly electronic and indie-based stuff, so I hope you guys enjoy. I'm gonna get things kicked off with my favorites of the year, 2017. It was certainly an interesting year. A lot of things happened outside the realm of music, to put it lightly. Unfortunately, a lot of things ended up happening within the world of music. There were a lot of big moments in the music scene, Kendrick coming out with his follow-up to Pimp a Butterfly, new albums from Gorillaz, The National, LCD Soundsystem coming back, that was huge. But in this video, you're just gonna kind of hear what my thoughts were on the best albums of the year. I guess I wouldn't really call them the best, but they're my favorites, because obviously music is subjective. You're gonna either like the picks, hate the picks, or, be ambivalent, but hopefully you guys agree, and if you disagree, that's cool too. That's the good thing about music. There's always a discourse, and people can always have a conversation about why they think certain music is good or bad, or why it works, doesn't work. So hopefully you guys like what I have to say, and there'll be more of this in the future. So we're going to start with my number 10 album of the year. That was going to be The Ooze by King Cruel. Now, I didn't think that 6 Feet Beneath the Moon was really that great. I thought it had some decent moments. Neptune Estate, Sea Mentality, Easy Easy, Ceiling 2. But I wasn't really a fan of basically him just taking essentially half the album's tracks from older material that he'd already done, recorded as, back when he was doing the Zoo Kid moniker, and just kind of reworking them, re-releasing them, putting an extra coat of sheen on it now that he's had this big production. I feel like it took a lot of the rawness and a lot of the charm of the originals, like Ocean Bed especially, and there was really no reason for him to retool Out Getting Ribs. I mean, that song was pretty much perfect as it already was. But I digress. The Ooze, across the board, the tunes are morose, they're sad, they're downtrodden, a little Dickensian almost, and just sort of the grossness and just sort of that, titular ooze that Archie is singing about. But despite that, the lyrical content really doesn't bring the record down as much as you'd think it would, just based off of that description, especially when we're talking about 19 tracks here. I mean, he took his time, which was not supposed to be a Mount Kimby King Cruel pun, but but with 19 tracks, we're talking about an album that could get bogged down in the themes, in the lyrical content, but it doesn't. It avoids this, fortunately, and I think that's due to the strong songwriting. I think it's due to the strong compositions. I mean, we're not finding a lot of exactly direct songs here, in the sense that we're not looking at really like verse, chorus, verse. Some of them are pretty formless. We've got a couple ambient interludes, of course, to break up the monotony. But we start the album off strong with Biscuit Town. I think this is one of the best album openers of the year, for sure. And it's just very loungy, but very like gritty and just grimy and gross. And, he's singing about how he just doesn't feel like he's where he wants to be, you know what I mean? Like Biscuit Town, it's like you're kind of stuck there. It's this placeholder for when you're somewhere you don't want to be, whether it's mentally in a funk or emotionally or just literally physically you don't like the town you're in, It feels like that's the Biscuit Town. Everybody has a Biscuit Town, maybe, you know what I mean? I love the submerged supermarket pop of Logos. It's really another standout. It's got a lot of subtle saxophone, which I like a lot. If you can incorporate sax into your music, I'm gonna like it. The ethereal Check One of the early singles, actually the first single off the album, that was really great. I loved how it has this sort of poetic quality to it. A lot of Archie's lyrics are definitely the soft, sensitive poet type, but it just sounds like a lullaby on the moon, man. It's got this spooky but beautiful kind of vibe to it. It like draws you in, but also like you kind of want to stay a little bit away from it. You're not sure, it's kind of a little creepy with the synthetic vocals in the background. It kind of sounds like Bjork's History of Touches, that little like Arca kind of sensibilities to the vocals, or like an Andy Stott kind of thing going on there. It's a very interesting fusion of sounds, but it works really well. Post-punk banger Dumb Surfer, that's amazing. It's a perfect song. You know, the music video encapsulates it perfectly. It's just this song that's great for like a debaucherous night out on the town kind of thing. Even Slush Puppy, one of the short tracks on the album, I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about this tune, but I think it's one of the best ones on the album for sure. It's got a great build-up. I love the pitch down vocals. I definitely knew it wasn't King Cruel, so it was cool that he like got a little bit of a vocal change of pace for that song, even though he does end up on the latter half of the song with some really like soul-crushing, like just shouting at the top of his lungs, or at least from the depths of his soul, just nothing is working with me. You know, he's really putting himself out there, and I like that a lot. He's really putting his soul to bear. You know what I mean? The Cadet Leaps, that's another highlight. Honestly, it's really great. It's really ambient, and it's got those like jazzy notes to it. Very atmospheric, very lush. It's like the best song on the album for headphone users. It's probably the most rewarding song if you're just listening to it. You're just listening to the waves of the synth pads just kind of like wash over you and undulate. It's really incredible. It is an overstuffed and flawed album. 19 tracks. You're not going to get, you know, an essential banger every time. But when there are highlights, there are definitely a lot of them, and they definitely outweigh the duller moments. Number 9 on my list is going to be The First Saturation by Brockhampton. I think these guys, not even really arguably, probably had the best 2017 out of like any artist or group or collective or band. You know, if you put out 3 albums in a calendar year, you know, you're going to be on somebody's radar. You're going to end up on a lot of lists. I think Saturation 1 had the best introduction. Like any movie trilogy, I think Brockhampton gets points on Saturation 1 for just having it be the freshest, you know what I mean? As far as people weren't really expecting that formula to really be repeated ad nauseum on Saturation 2 and 3. So, you know, when you get that Bareface finale song on Waste, you know, with John Mayer guitar solo kind of stuff, and the emotional micro tracks, like Tupac in this case, on Saturation 1, you know, they feel fresh. You haven't heard this before, you know what I mean? So when they repeat them on later albums, you know, it does kind of, I don't want to say get stale, because that would mean that they're bad songs, but you know, you're kind of expecting it at that point, so maybe your excitement isn't at the same level as when you're hearing stuff like Gold and Face and Star for the first time, you know what I mean? And speaking of those, like the singles, oh my goodness, I mean, they basically released half the album leading up to it. Having the time to digest those tracks, they were still amazing in the context of the album. Having all these guys just like be around each other and just be like friends in real life, it's great that, you know, you have this this ease, this energy, this complementary flow from like verse to verse that, you know, really complements each person and plays to their strengths. You know, I think that's really great, and it really lends a lot to each song. It prevents each song from getting boring, more importantly, I think, because you've got like 4 or 5 guys on each song. It's not just a Kevin song all the way through. It's not just a Joba song all the way through. It's not just an Amir Van song all the way through. So you get that variety on every song. It lends a lot to the replayability of these songs, to these albums, and the hooks. Like Gold, that's the best hook. It's the best hook out of like all of the Saturation albums, and that's not actually really probably that controversial of a statement, I don't think. And Face, that's one of the better slow burners on the album. It's a good song that shows off like the sensitive side, more soulful, R&B focused elements that each of the guys bring to the table. I think it's just a really, really solid all-around album. There's not really any like bad songs or clunkers or anything like that to be seen. You're definitely going to find something that you like on Saturation 1. The next one at number 8 is going to be Sampha with his debut album Process. I think it's an incredible debut. I don't really think that you can do a debut much more confidently and much more inspired than this. It's affecting, soulful electronic music, but it's, you know, got that human element to it that's so important. You know, it prevents it from getting lost in all the bleeps and bloops. Not to mention the running theme throughout the album of loss and grief and process. You know, I mean, Sampha lost his mom to cancer. That's some big stuff. You know, that's really hard for somebody to deal with, and fortunately he happens to be a musician, so he's got a built-in response to that, whereas I've got to make an album. This is like his catharsis, you know what I mean? And it's one of those things like the Mount Erie album that came out this year, A Crow Looked at Me, where it's like you kind of almost don't want to listen to it going into it because you know it's going to be him putting his emotions out there and him being so vulnerable and him chronicling, basically from beginning to end, or like, from it happening to present day, him having to just tough it out and sing about the things that are important to him and the people that are important to him and how he got through it. No One Knows Me Like the Piano. That's definitely the album's centerpiece, without a doubt. It's the most affecting, most emotional track. Beautiful piano, beautiful vocals. And then you've got the spacier, more atmospheric tunes, even though they have those hard-hitting drums, those thumps, like in Plastic 100 Degrees Celsius, and Incomplete Kisses especially. That's one of my favorite songs on the album. There's also a great use of tension and build-up and storytelling on Blood on Me. I think that's a really great song. And Timmy's Prayer, I didn't like that as much when it came out as like a first single. It didn't really give me a good idea of what to expect kind of from Sampha on the album. After listening to it in the context of the album, it really grew on me a lot. So if you like your electronic music with a good touch of soul, with like a human core to it, I think Process is going to be definitely something that you would want to check out this year. The next one I wanted to talk about at number 7 is the Sylvan Esso album, What Now? I haven't really seen a lot of talk about it in the YouTube community. I haven't really seen people mention how good of an album this is. I feel like it's really getting overlooked. I don't know if people were just expecting something different, like maybe more of a drastic change from the self-titled debut. But I think it's spectacular. I mean, it's not a perfect album at all by any means. I definitely think they were able to avoid a sophomore slump on this one. I mean, Amelia Neath and Nick Sanborn, they complement each other perfectly. You've got Amelia Neath coming from Mountain Man, that like lo-fi, indie folk, really cutesy, woodsy kind of sound, and Nick Sanborn, who was doing his own stuff, just making really abstract but like really intriguing experimental electronic music. I'm really glad the two of them found each other because I think they make a great pair, and I think that titling it What Now is really it's kind of like they answer their own question almost, because like they say they're asking what now, but they're presenting this album as sort of their answer to their own question, and I think they gave a great answer. You've got Just Dancing, which is one of the best songs, probably the best song on the album. It's got a great shuffling, percussive groove to it, a lot of really cool elements to it. I like that it sort of retreads what Coffee was doing lyrically, in the sense that it's just a song focused around love based on the dance floor, or at least in the case of Just Dancing, the lack thereof. It's often such a flirtatious act, the act dancing, and she kind of like takes the flirtiness right out of it. She's like, nope, we're just dancing. I'm not interested, this is just, I like dancing. You're cool, I'm sure you're a great guy. No thanks, I just think the concept of this song lyrically is very amusing to me, and it also helps that it's a great song too, and ironically one that you would definitely want to dance to on the dance floor. Probably one of the other greatest songs on the album, again, sort of an irony to it, is called Song. That's one of my favorite songs. It's just called Song. A point taken away for creativity of the song title, but I then give that point back for it being a great one. It's because it's such a good balanced mix of like acoustic and electronic, and it's emotional, but like not in a way that's like overly saccharine and sweet, like this album definitely could have been if it were put in less capable, competent hands. But I think they do a great job with the track, and I love the minimal approach to Die Young, one of the other singles off the album. It's impressive in its restraint as much as it is for the songwriting. Even though it is one of those songs that feels like it's kind of just biding its time until the chorus comes around, I still feel like that they do just enough with it still to make it engaging to listen through, obviously just beyond the chorus. And Radio was a good introduction single. I thought it was just as great within the context of the album. I like how it makes a wry sort of wink to the banality and the tropes of commercial radio pop. Which again, there's a hint of, I think I'm using irony correctly, I sure hope I am, I've been saying it a lot for this entry, but that song ends up being the lead single, it ends up getting a lot of radio play, sure not on, the top 40 or, the Billboard, the contemporary whatevers, but you know, the satellite radios, the NPRs, stuff like that. It was definitely getting pretty heavy rotation, which is kind of funny because they're kind of making fun of the thing that they're now more or less a part of, obviously to a lesser degree, but, you know, that's kind of splitting hairs at that point, I think. I think they're just having a little bit of fun, and there's nothing wrong with a fun synth-pop record, and that's what this is. So check out What Now if you like Sylvan Esso, if you like folksy approaches to electronic music or folksy fusions with electronic music. I think you're gonna appreciate it a lot. Up next at number 6, we've got Com Truise with his album Iteration. I think this was another overlooked album this year. I feel like people have kind of fallen off the Com Truise bandwagon in 2017, and I don't blame them, because before this album came out, I was one of those people. I was kind of sick of the diminishing returns that I was getting on his subsequent EPs and albums. With Iteration, we get a different iteration of the Com Truise formula, and he mixes it up just enough to make it interesting, which is definitely something that he needed to do. Maybe it came a little too late, but I still give him points for trying and doing it at all. You know, synthwave is just kind of pretty derivative, kind of by design. There's not really a whole lot of things. You can't really go too far out of the box in synthwave, or else it becomes something other than synthwave. But I think Com Truise, Seth Haley, he was able to compromise and find something cool, and do something new with the genre. It's definitely darker material overall, which I really appreciate. That's something that I think he should be dabbling in a lot more, definitely on future installments as well. Like Cirthio, that's a great tune. I love the orchestral hit, the pew, pew, pew. It's a little bit evil almost, a little menacing, a little brooding. And then later on in the album we get almost like Aphex Twin influences on Propagation, which is really great, another one of the lead singles. There are also some of his best melodies just overall, and strongest compositions on this album, especially on Memory. Like right around that minute 30 in point, that is like the best moment on the entire record. Like I said, I'd still like to see more of a change, you know, something still a little bit new on his upcoming material, but I think Iteration was definitely one of his best records, definitely the best thing he's done since Galactic Melt. So any synthwave fan, any electronic fan, I think you're really gonna like it. I think it's definitely another overlooked record that you should definitely take another listen to if you haven't yet already. Now at number 5, we have a return appearance, so very soon already, from Brockhampton, Saturation 3 this time. Obviously it's a late edition, but it's one that's well deserved, maybe because it's fresher in my mind, that's why it's a little bit higher. But I also think that it's because these guys, again, 3 albums in, it's not even close to stale. I don't want to talk too much about this record, just because I have already previously talked a lot about Brockhampton earlier in the list, but I will say that I like that they gave a lot of the smaller members bigger parts in this record. You know, Joba, especially his verse on Boogie, oh my goodness. Bareface showing up, not waiting until the last possible minute on the last song on the album. He shows up on Bleach, which is like 4 or 5 songs in, and it also happens to be the best song on the record. Really beautiful vocal harmonies, and there's a great rhythm on Stains too. I think that is definitely one of the better songs as well. I don't know what some people are talking about, where they're saying that it's like the most derivative or the most by the numbers. I'm not saying any names, but I'm just saying that that's a bad thing move, Tano, if you're going to say that Stains is not one of the better songs on the album. Also, I would feel remiss if I didn't talk about Sister. The first half of the 6-minute track, Sister Nation, wasn't so hot on Nation, but Sister, great experimental production. I love the breakbeat-inspired percussion. It's really frantic. It's really got this menacing bass line at the beginning. Really, really cool. Really, really wacky and warped and just dark and crazy and wild. And there's also kind of weirdly across the album, especially on like Zipper, there's this weird focus on like carnival kind of music almost. But again, if anything, I just give them points for even trying to do that in the first place. You know, they're like, how do we keep it fresh? I know, carnival barker music, let's do that, let's throw that in there. Not every instrumental decision sticks, but the fact that they took more risks and were willing to take risks, I think that really speaks to how successful this album really is, and I'm really excited to see what Brockhampton has next. I think 2018, despite 2017 being like the year of Brockhampton, I also still think that 2018 is going to be the year of Brockhampton. I think that's when they're truly going to blow up. I think that's when they're going to be on everybody's radar. So, Saturation 3, my number 5 record of the year. Number 4, we have Blank Mass with World Eater. And I found this album out just due to the strength of the album cover alone, which is terrifying. It is scary. It is very, very scary. And I could have sworn that at first impression, this was going to be like a metal record, some kind of like harsh noise, like a prurient kind of thing going on. But as I listened to it, it really surprised me. It really took me off guard by how beautiful and melodic and how well structured a lot of these songs are. And there's not a lot of songs. It's really only like 7 or 8 tracks, but a lot of these tunes go into the 7, 8, 9-minute mark in the case of the monolithic freak show of a song, Rhesus Negative. That is an insane tune. That is not a song you can ever show your parents, unless they're really cool parents and they happen to be into like some really up-tempo industrial music, because that's what you're going to get here. It equals out the terrifying and the overwhelming and the industrial harsher moments with equally gorgeous, lush, and extravagant, beautiful instrumentation and moments as well. Within Rhesus Negative, it's 9 minutes, like I said, so it covers a lot of sonic ground. So you're going to get both of those things within the same track. But then you're also going to have songs like Please, where it pretty much sticks to the electronic sound, and it doesn't really go very aggressive at all, but it has this great build to it. You know, a lot of these tracks really build very well. They're done in a way that each successive section really builds well off of the section that came before it, you know what I mean? So when you have a song like Silent Treatment, which again is like 7.5 minutes, so we're not dealing with like 3.5 minute, 4 minute like songs here. We're dealing with long, complex tunes here, and he really makes the most of it. He puts really beautiful vocal harmonies, even though most of them are pretty chopped up. They're either pitched up or pitched down, very disembodied, very creepy almost in places, but it's sort of that like beautiful creepiness that's sort of like you would kind of get from like vaporwave or something like that. That's sort of a sound that gets lent to this album as well. I mean, you've got the intro track, John Doe's Carnival of Error, and that almost has this like, again, this resurgence of carnival music. I feel like 2017 was low-key the year of carnival music. Another thing I like about the intro track that keeps it from being just, you know, a little intro track, you know, a little 2-minute snippet kind of thing, is that it really actually builds quite well into what becomes Rhesus Negative, the next track on the album, like the first full big blast of noise, you know what I mean? And again, I love the vaporwave influences on here, and they show up a little bit later as well on the latter third of the triad of harsh noise and drone that is Minnesota East Force Naked. I think that Naked track, I really can't describe it any other way than it's just like tried and true vaporwave. Like, that's what it is, you know? Which is, again, really baffling, especially because it's prefaced by like 6.5 minutes of like prurient, basically. It's really fascinating that he's able to blend these sounds that should not work at all. And he really creates a really nice cohesive album out of it. So if you're a fan of Arca or Death Grips or even like George Clanton, you know what I mean? Like Mirror Kisses, that kind of stuff. If you want to see all those guys get put together in a room and make an album with music, you're going to end up with World Eater. So Blank Mass with World Eater is going to be my number 4 record of the year. And moving on to number 3 is going to be Beach Fossils with Somersault. I think this was probably the, to use the vernacular of the year, the best glow-up. It's like such a huge step and a huge evolution for the band to go from Clash the Truth, which is like lo-fi, dirty, scuzzy, shoegazy, like post-punk and like surf rock, to Somersault, which is this beautiful, orchestral, grand statement. It's such a jarring sensation listening to this record, especially for the first time. I had to make sure that I was still listening to a Beach Fossils record, because by the time St. Ivy comes on with like the Beatlesque harmonies and the guitar solo and the flute solo. I mean, Beach Fossils and flute solo should never be things that meet, and they do, and it sounds great. I was just very confused, but in a good way. You know, like I said, so you've got lusher instrumentation, you've got saxophone, which again, if you ever want your album to sound better than it is right now, you gotta add some sax to it. That's the secret. But you've got strings as well, really gorgeous string compositions. You've got harpsichord on a couple tracks, like Closer Everywhere. And I hate the harpsichord, y'all. The harpsichord sucks as a musical instrument. I hate it so much. It should have been left in the Middle Ages. But that being said, obviously the overall sound of the song helps as well. But you've got piano too. Social Jet Lag is probably the best song that combines all of these things that I've been talking about. A little bit of piano. There's some great trumpet, like some really jazzy, like film noir kind of trumpet. It's like a song that I would listen to while it's like raining outside in like Chicago at night. It's definitely a song that you can really easily visualize like where you are. You know what I mean? It really paints a picture really well, that song. I'm really excited to see what they do next, because now that they've made this statement that we can do all these other things, we don't just have to stick to guitars, bass, drums, and vocals. We can do more things. We can really flesh our songs out and really add a level of maturity that people didn't think was possible. I'm really excited to see if they double down on that and make an even more mature record. I'm not even sure that's possible, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next with it. So Somersault was my number 3 record of the year. We're now at number 2, and this is going to be maybe a surprise pick to some people, because I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it a lot. It's pretty much just been sitting on Bandcamp. There's been no, like, you know, physical release or cassette even or anything like that. And that's the new Heavenly Beat record, John Pena, the ex-bassist of Beach Fossils, which is kind of a funny little way that turned out. I think he returns to form with another strong outing of tropical pop music as Heavenly Beat. He's released 3 great albums in like a 4-year span, and that's pretty hard to do at such a high level consistently. There's a more deliberate, perhaps, lo-fi production quality that gives a lot of the songs, makes them sound like demos almost, which could be a take it or leave it quality. I'm sure some people won't like it. It's definitely a quieter record because of that, a little more scuzzy, a little more, you know, imperfect almost, but I do like that it kind of also still acknowledges his previous record, Eucharist, and sort of builds and creates more electronic-leaning songs rather than focusing on the more traditional acoustic guitar and, you know, kind of tropical bongos and percussion that you would find on like Prominence or Talent, you know, some of his earlier records. You've got more crystalline chords, you've got more like 4/4 house beats pretty much. They're not like straightforward dance tracks, you know, you're not going to be, you know, in a Miami club listening to Bodega or anything like that, but they're definitely enjoyable, like, headphones tunes. It's more introspective because of that too, which is really cool. Although most of his albums lyrically are pretty introspective, you know, they deal with a lot of self-doubt, and that's definitely more prevalent on this album as well. I do think the variety of sounds that you get, even though it being a more electronic record, you do also get the slower moments, you get the almost jazzier moments, you get the dusky, like, lamp-lit R&B croons of Ripasso towards the end of the album. I think that's a great highlight. And like I said, when it comes to Heavenly Beat, for me at least, I know I'm expecting 2 things: immaculate hooks and borderline perfect melodies. And that's what you get with John. It's just kind of repackaged a little differently. So if you've liked his stuff in the past, or if you haven't even heard of him at all, I would definitely give his earlier albums, especially start with Prominence probably, and move forward. Take a listen to those and see if you like it. If you dig what you hear, then I think you're going to like John too. I really think that John is not going to, like, you know, polarize anybody or anything like that. It's just another great, solid record from Heavenly Beat. I can't complain. I would love another one in the next year. We'll see if it happens, but if it doesn't, I'll still be returning to John. So that's going to be my number 2 album of the year. So now we're here at album number 1, and I'm going to have to give the honor to the new Always record, Antisocialites. It's a more upfront, direct sound from the Toronto 4-piece. I loved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, their debut record, the self-titled. I thought that was amazing. It took me by surprise, totally blew me away. some of the best tracks that I've ever heard. Really beautiful, sweet, sugary, earnest dream pop music. Adult Diversion, that's an amazing intro track. Atop a Cake especially. There was so much to love about that record, and they, in my opinion, had a lot to live up to. And I was waiting. I heard nothing from these guys. There was no peep of an album on the way. And then suddenly, boom, like 3-4 years later, finally news of a follow-up, and Antisocialites pretty much fully delivered. I think it met the expectations right where I was leaving them, and that was pretty high. It's still going to be dreamy and atmospheric and a little jangly in places. There's definitely elements of the self-titled that are still going to be on this record, but I definitely appreciate them going a more direct route, going a more, not really abrasive, but, you know, there's more angular guitar leads, there's more energy. A lot of these songs are a lot more up-tempo than you would have found on the self-titled. Plimsoll Punks, that's like a ferocious fast track. I love it. It gets to a point on songs like that, and like Hey, and Saved by a Waif, and like Lollipop, Ode to Jim, that we're getting into like punk pretty much, which is crazy to think that, you know, back when Always put out their self-titled, that this would be where they would be now. I mean, I love what I'm hearing from them guys. It's dream pop, but it has enough variety to it that you stick around, and it's definitely worth repeat listens. I think some of their best songwriting is on here. Molly Rankin's vocals are better than ever. They're a lot clearer. Everything is a little bit crisper. I think adding the better production definitely helps this album a lot. I think it also helps them kind of avoid, again, that sophomore slump and just making the same record over again, which, again, you would have no complaints from me if they did that, but I do like that they were able to make something new, make something different, get a stronger sound, and be a little more forward with everything in general. I think it was a really good move. It really paid off, because they're my album of the year, Antisocialites. I hope you guys like this video. I'm going to try to make more of these in the future. We'll see if I can get my Songs of the Year list taken care of and taped before the end of the year actually is over. We'll see. If not, maybe it'll be out the first week of January, something like that. I hope you guys liked what I had to say. Let me know. Either like, comment, or subscribe. Definitely subscribe, because I'm going to try to get more of these out with some increased regularity in the future here. Going to start 2018 off right with a lot of new videos, and you watched The Information.